friends. Happy Serve Week. I am super glad that you guys have joined us here online as we continue to journey through the life of Paul. We've walked through a lot of Paul's life already, whether you realize it or not, and we're actually coming to the end of the book of Acts. We've only got a couple of chapters left, and we have watched Paul change a lot. Yes, his name changed, right? He was going by Saul for a very long time, and then as he became a preacher and a teacher, he started to go by Paul instead. He went from this very hard-nosed, oppositional Pharisee who wanted absolutely nothing to do with Jesus and his followers, and then he became someone who was wholeheartedly devoted to the message of the gospel and making sure that the whole world knew who Jesus was and what he was all about. And leading people into their relationship with Christ, right? We've seen him go through, being all mission-focused, right? Very narrow-minded, and making sure that people far away heard about Jesus, which is great, but he did it at the expense of the people closest to him sometimes, right? That whole Paul, Barnabas, John Mark issue that happened, but we've seen him change, right? He now understands a lot better the need to show love to those around him, right? And to be Christ to those that are in close quarters with him, not just those that he preaches to. Forgive me, I'm sick this week, but that's okay. We're going to just keep going. What else have we seen? Paul, right? We've seen his friendships change, right? People have come and gone throughout his life. He has stood firm, right? In what he believes in, even in the face of severe opposition, when things, are life-threatening and people don't understand why he continues to do what he does, he keeps going so that the gospel can be preached to the world that needs it. Right? He is a pretty cool guy. He has started and encouraged countless churches at this point in his journey through Acts. He's written several letters to those churches, and he continually encourages them to keep on living out the call of Christ on their life. And he is this man of grit and determination, right? Nothing will stop Paul from bringing the gospel to people. He's a man who understands grace, right, and patience, because he experienced those things from God on the road to Damascus and all throughout his own journey. And today, we're actually going to see a rather different side of Paul, one that felt overwhelmingly discouraged. And he thought about giving up and throwing in the towel up until he met two people who quickly became lifelong friends of his. So last week, if you guys remember, we looked at Paul being in Athens, the city of Athens in Greece. It was this rough and tough town full of idolatry, and he gave this great sermon to the people of Athens about the sin that is idolatry, and he introduced them to the one true God, right? They had that temple to the unknown God, and Paul was like, I know who that God is. Let me tell you all about him, and kind of shared that journey of walking with Christ with these people. And it seems somewhat successful, right? Like we talk about it pretty happily, but it wasn't as great as Paul had wanted it to be. And he was there alone, right? He was in Athens because Silas and Timothy were up in Berea still. So Paul was going it alone. And when you go it alone in life, in ministry, in leadership, at some point that starts to break you. And there were, big letdowns for Paul in Thessalonica and in Berea, and he just was starting to feel it, right? Well, we open up in Acts chapter 18, verse 1, and this is what it says. Then Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. Okay, so sets his sights on Corinth. It's about 50 miles from Athens. And it's right up there with Athens in terms of rough and tough. Some writers at the time would say that it was this town where none but the tough survived. You had to be street smart and hard in order to keep yourself afloat in this city. And it was a big city, like really big. Probably the third largest in Greece at the time, with about 200,000 people in it. It was this Roman colony. It was super influential. It's situated, if you look on that nifty map, it's right there on the Isthmus of Corinth, which is that very narrow neck of land connecting the southern and northernmost parts of Greece together. Right, people are coming and going from Corinth all the time. I know I say that a lot about a lot of these cities, but it's true. Paul went to cities that were situated where people would come and go all the time because he wanted everyone to hear about Jesus. And so he walks into this city, right, after 50 miles of walking and leaving Athens, which was a very familiar city, and he is scared, right? He's fearful, he's tired. He had had such limited success in Athens and Thessalonica and Berea that he had gone into these cities with this great hope and this great determination, and it was slowly whittled away, right, by the enemy. And he was just having this weight kind of rest on him now of like failure, which if you are a people pleaser, you get that feeling, right, that you have let someone down. And to make things even worse for Paul, like poor Paul's by himself still. And I don't know about you, but I could not spend that much time by myself. Walking 50 miles by myself, after spending days or weeks or months by myself in a city that I don't understand, that is too big. And Timothy and Silas, they hadn't joined him yet, right? And he was still going solo, and in leadership, in life, in ministry, like I said, that's hard to be by yourself. But God is a God of comfort, right? He notices his children. He listens to your prayers and your pleas and your heartaches. And Paul was no exception. So we keep reading in chapter 18 of the book of Acts, starting in verse 2. This is what Luke tells us. Once in Corinth, he became acquainted with a Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently arrived from Italy with his wife, Priscilla. They had left Italy when Claudius Caesar deported all Jews from Rome. Paul lived and worked with them, for they were tent makers, just as he was. Each Sabbath found Paul at the synagogue trying to convince the Jews and Greeks alike and after Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, Paul spent all his time preaching the word. He testified to the Jews that Jesus was the Messiah, but when they had opposed and insulted him, Paul shook the dust from his clothes and said, "Your blood is upon your own heads. I'm innocent. From now on, I will go and preach to the Gentiles." Then he left and went to the home of Justus, a Gentile who worshipped God and lived next door to the synagogue. And so on and so forth. His time in Corinth continues. But here's all, God literally, this is what he did, gave Paul friends. That was it. There was no come in and make all the people believe Paul and follow after him with everything that he had, right? That's not what Paul needed. Paul needed encouragement from fellow believers. And God brought the exact right people to Paul. So it's this husband and wife team, right? Aquila and Priscilla. And they had lived in Rome before, up in Italy, but the emperor, right, Claudius, I believe is his name, kicked all of the Christians out. Okay, cool. So this husband and wife duo, they made their way down to Corinth in Greece, and they set up their tent-making business there instead. And do you know who else was a tent maker by trade? It's Paul. Paul was, right? He had learned this skill from his father growing up, who had also been a tent maker. It was a way that Paul could make money while he was on these missionary travels. So God brought, right, these two Christians who lived in the city and did something that Paul knew how to do. And Paul eventually became business partners with them for a time, right? He supported his own self by being a tent maker alongside Priscilla and Aquila. And that was just the encouragement that Paul needed. After that, right, after he meets these two people, right, he's down in the dumps and on his luck and he doesn't know what to do. And then God introduces these two wonderful Christians and things start to look up and they start to get better. Because after a short while, right, it says that Timothy and Silas, they joined him from Macedonia, right? They came back down. And now he had all of his favorite people with him. And his mood was back up, and even though the Jews, right, in Corinth, they didn't like what he had to say, right? That's what Luke tells us here. It says that he just brushed it off, right? Luke tells us that when they opposed and insulted him, Paul shook the dust from his clothes and said, all right, if you, this isn't my fault if you don't want to listen to me. I'm going to go find people who do. And he went and kept doing the thing he was called to do. He took it, moved on. He wasn't bearing this weight alone anymore. And then Paul actually ended up staying in Corinth for 1.5 years. 18 months, maybe a little bit more. He was there with Priscilla and Aquila doing life and ministry and business together. And the church at Corinth, the church that those letters of 1st and 2nd Corinthians are written to, was one of Paul's biggest headaches, okay? Don't get me wrong. And if you read the letters, you'll understand why. But this city, right, was messed up. Corinth was a place of terrible things, of awful sin everywhere you looked. And there was this little pocket of Christians that were there in Corinth just trying to do their best. So the church in Corinth was a headache for Paul because they couldn't seem to grasp a lot of things. But it was one of his most alive churches that he interacted with. He did life and ministry and grew with not just Priscilla and Aquila, but with the people in Corinth. And it became one of the greatest churches in the area. And here's what this whole story teaches me. It's very short, but here's what I learned from it. We aren't meant to do life alone. We aren't. God designed us to be in community with each other. Paul had never felt more discouraged and down than when he was alone trying to do ministry. But the second he found people to do it with, he perked right up and was back to his normal self. And God blessed it, right? And I was sitting thinking about this, and this is definitely a lesson I've taught you guys before several times, right? We did it with Jesus, right? He had all of his disciple buddies, and he had, his inner three, and then he sent them out in pairs, right? We're not made to do life alone. Said it then. We talked through David, right? David had Jonathan. They were BFFs. They didn't have to do life alone. And now, here we are with Paul, and I'm sure I'm going to bring it up again some other time, but Paul couldn't do it by himself. He needed people around him. God made this repetitive in the Bible for a reason, I think. And it's probably because it's important. We shouldn't do life alone. We need to be in community with other believers. So find yourself some friends. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because I struggle with this a lot, especially when I first got here. But find yourself some friends, right? They need to know you and know Jesus and love Jesus like you do, and they'll be there, right? When life gets hard, when things don't make sense, they'll be around to encourage you, to love on you when you feel discouraged and unlovable. And, here's the thing. If you don't have them, you want to know what you can do? 2 things. 1, pray to God to bring them to you. I've been blessed, right, to find those friends here in Muncie. Now, granted, 2 of them just moved very far away, what feels like very far away. But I still talk to them all the time. I was literally talking to Alexa this morning. So they're still there, right? They encourage me. We love on each other. It's great. And those that are here, right, the friends that I've kept here in Muncie, still encouraging me, still loving me, still showing me that I am worthy to be loved, right? So pray that God brings you friends, godly friends who want nothing but the best for you. And second thing you can do, and I said this with David and Jonathan, we can pray, right, for Jonathan all day long. We can pray for God to bring us that person that we can do life with. But we also sometimes, most of the time, all of the time, we need to be a Jonathan, right? Because sometimes, right, God will answer someone else's prayer through you. You get to go be the Jonathan to someone else, to someone's David. Or you get to go be the Priscilla Aquila to a Paul. So encourage your friends, right? Love on them like Jesus would. And accept the encouragement and love from your friends. Pray to God that you find them, that he brings them to you. sit and wait patiently for them to show up. And life will be a little bit better. And we'll be able to handle the hard parts, right? The rough things that happen when you just can't handle the day anymore or something upset you. You've got a friend, right? That loves Jesus and wants to encourage you and love on you. And those are great things. So find some friends. Friends? Sound good? Cool. With that, I have one announcement before I give the blessing. Next week, the 27th of June, yes, is Serve Celebration. So this whole week, right, is Serve Week here at Union Chapel. If you're going to be a part of it, I'm super excited to get to see you. If not, keep up to date, right? On Facebook, we'll post lots of fun pictures and videos and things for you to look at to still feel like you're a part of it. But that being said, Serve Celebration is happening on Sunday. So I will not have a lesson for you. Instead, I want you guys to watch with your parents and see all the cool things that I'm sure God's going to do in this next week here at Serve. So I won't have anything for you next week, but I'll be back in, I guess that's July. Oh my word, July. But I'll be back in July and we can look a little more and finish out the life of Paul here in the next month. So with that, here's the blessing. May the Lord bless you, keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, give you peace. I will see you here in 2 weeks, friends. 2 weeks. Bye, guys.